How does one night of harmless fun turn into the moment my husband stops defending me? Why did a few free drinks from his best friend become the reason I'm standing in a crowded bar, realizing everyone's watching him walk away? What happens when laughter turns into legal silence? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Amara, 32, and I swear it wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was just one night, one round too many, one of those fun wife moments my friends always say keeps a marriage alive. Ryan, my husband's best friend, kept the drinks coming, and I let him. I laughed too loud, leaned too close, let people take pictures because it felt good to be the center of attention again. I told myself it was harmless. Elias didn't see it that way. He sat at the end of the bar, watching, quiet as always, that steady calm that used to make me feel safe, but now just made me feel judged. When we got home, he asked if I was joking. I told him he was overreacting, that men these days can't handle confident women. He didn't argue. He just looked at me once, long enough to make my stomach twist, then said he'd handle it properly. I thought that meant a fight, maybe a few days of silence. I didn't realize he meant something else entirely, something slow, deliberate, and legal. Now I keep hearing the word proper in my head, like a clock ticking down to the moment he proves I went too far. It started on a Friday night that was supposed to be simple. Ryan texted earlier that afternoon saying a few of the old group were meeting at the new rooftop bar downtown, and I should come. He said Elias would be there too if I convinced him, but I didn't even ask. I knew how that would go. Elias hates loud places, hates crowded bars, hates watching me laugh too hard at someone else's jokes. So I told Ryan I'd come alone, and that Elias was probably tired. He sent a winking emoji. I didn't think much of it at the time. I remember standing in front of the mirror before I left, adjusting my dress a little tighter around the waist. Nothing too revealing, just enough to remind myself that I could still turn heads if I wanted to. It had been a long week, work deadlines, laundry piling up, the usual quiet tension between Elias and me. I told myself I deserved a night out. I even said it out loud. You earned it. The bar was packed, all glass and neon. Ryan spotted me first, waving from the far end. He looked the same as always, smiling too wide, acting like every joke he told deserved applause. He ordered my drink before I could even sit down. I should have said no after the second one, but the music was loud, the lights were soft, and I wanted to feel interesting again. Ryan leaned in close when he talked, his breath warm against my ear, pretending it was the only way to hear each other. He said things like, "You've still got that spark, and Elias doesn't appreciate how much people like you." I laughed because that's what I do when I don't want to admit something hits too close. I told him Elias was fine, that we were just different. Ryan smirked and said, "Different is one word for it." When Elias showed up an hour later, I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't expected him to actually come. He was wearing his usual grey button-down, sleeves rolled up, the one that makes him look like he's coming from a meeting even when he's not. He walked in, saw me beside Ryan, and froze just long enough for me to notice. Then he smiled, polite and distant. Ryan slapped his shoulder, called him the man of the hour, and ordered another round before Elias could say anything. I tried to read his face, but he just sat down beside me, quiet, his hand resting on the table instead of on me. Ryan raised his glass and toasted to loyal friends. Everyone laughed except Elias. He just nodded once and drank slowly. As the night went on, Ryan kept buying rounds, each one another small mistake I didn't bother to stop. People started filming little clips for stories, and I leaned into it, posing, laughing, pretending I didn't see Elias watching. When Ryan said I was glowing, I smiled and said, maybe I just needed more nights like this. Elias didn't say a word. At one point, Ryan put his hand on my back to steady me as I stood to dance. I let it stay there longer than I should have. The DJ switched songs, something slower, and for a second, I forgot who was watching. Elias got up then, quietly, without saying anything. I noticed only when the chair scraped. I turned, ready to call out, but he was already walking toward the door. Ryan asked what his problem was. I said he was just tired. Everyone nodded like that made sense, but my stomach twisted. Still, I stayed another hour. When I finally called a car, Ryan offered to wait with me outside. The air was cool, my head buzzing. He said Elias should be grateful I still wore my ring in public. I laughed too loud and said, he doesn't mind. At home, the lights were off except for one lamp in the living room. Elias was sitting there, phone face down on the table. I said he could have told me he was leaving. He said he didn't want to ruin my fun. I told him not to be dramatic. He asked if I was joking. I said, about what? He just looked at me for a long time, then asked if Ryan had paid for all the drinks. I said, so, what if he did? It's called being generous. He nodded once, calm, like he'd expected that answer. Then he stood up, took his mug from the coffee table, and said he'd handle it properly. I laughed, asked what that even meant, but he didn't answer. He walked into the kitchen, rinsed the mug, and set it on the opposite counter from where mine usually sat. I followed him, saying he was overreacting, that it was just one night, that he was acting jealous for no reason. He said, it's not jealousy, it's clarity. I rolled my eyes and said he'd probably been waiting for an excuse to act superior. He didn't bite. He just picked up his phone, checked something, and said quietly, you should go to bed. You'll need rest. I went upstairs fuming, half drunk, half defensive. In the mirror, my makeup looked smudged, but my smile still perfect. I told myself he'd calm down by morning. He always did. When I woke, his side of the bed was cold. Downstairs, there were 2 mugs on the counter. His clean, mine half full and cold. A faint smell of coffee hung in the air, mixed with something sharper, like printer toner. The machine on his desk blinked with a green light. I walked over and saw a single blank page sitting on the tray. For a second, I almost called him just to ask what he was printing so early, but I didn't. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. Instead, I threw the paper in the trash and checked my phone. A message from Lena. Saw your tag last night, you wild thing. And another from Ryan. Hope he didn't give you grief. You looked amazing. I smiled, screen glowing in my hand. If people thought I looked amazing, then maybe I was. Maybe Elias just couldn't handle someone who still turned heads. That thought comforted me for about 5 minutes. Then I saw the last thing on the counter, his phone charger missing, a small sticky note on the fridge that just said, Downtown 10:45. I stared at it while the coffee maker hissed. Downtown. A meeting, maybe. He hadn't said anything about one. The time was written too neatly, underlined once. I told myself it meant nothing, that he was just being dramatic again. I tore the note down, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash with the blank paper. Before I left for work, I checked my reflection again. I looked fine, better than fine. I whispered, You'll see, Elias, you'll miss this. Then I locked the door behind me, not realizing how quiet that house had become, how every little sound was already evidence being filed away somewhere I couldn't see. That night, when I came home, the lamp was off. The air smelled faintly of toner again. A small envelope sat on the table addressed in his handwriting. Household. I didn't open it. I told myself it was bills. Always bills. I poured a glass of wine and scrolled through the photos Ryan had tagged from the bar, smiling even when my chest tightened. I told myself everything was still under control. It always had been. Until it wasn't. The next morning started with silence that felt heavier than any argument. The kind that sits in the corners and watches you move. I came down the stairs half expecting Elias to be gone again, but he was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with his laptop open. He didn't look up when I said good morning, just reached for his mug, the same one from last night, and sipped slowly. I asked if he was mad, or if we were going to keep pretending everything was fine. He said he didn't like pretending, but he was willing to try if it made things easier for me. The way he said easier for me sounded like an insult wrapped in calm. I told him he was being dramatic, that it was one stupid night. He said, I know exactly how many drinks there were. I paid the card balance this morning. That threw me off. I poured coffee I didn't want, and told him he was acting like some accountant from a bad marriage movie. He said quietly, better that than someone who drinks away their dignity. I froze, half laughing. I told him I didn't lose anything, that he was the one with the problem. He didn't argue. He just opened a new tab on his laptop and said, maybe I am. The way he said it scared me more than yelling would have. He wasn't angry, he was focused. I changed the subject, talked about work, about how Lena and I were planning to pitch a new campaign. He nodded but didn't really listen. When I said I might meet Ryan and a few others later to smooth things over, he finally looked up. Don't, he said. You've already said enough. I laughed, tried to brush it off. He closed the laptop, stood, and walked to the sink. His mug clicked against the counter, his movements slow and precise. I asked if he was seriously going to hold a grudge over nothing. He said, it's not nothing. You just want it to be. I told him that if he kept being cold, people would think something was wrong. He turned slightly, eyes flat, and said, people already do. The tone was final. I grabbed my bag, muttered something about him being impossible, and left before he could say more. At work, Lena was waiting by my desk with that grin she uses when gossip's fresh. She said, girl, everyone saw that story. Ryan tagged you in 3 clips. I asked her to delete them, but she said they were already everywhere. She showed me one, me laughing, glass raised, Ryan's hand on my back. In the background, Elias's face half turned, frozen mid-breath. I stared at the screen too long. Lena said it was harmless, that I looked happy. I forced a smile and said exactly, happiness doesn't need permission. By lunchtime, a few co-workers had made little jokes. Someone said I was the life of the party. Another teased about Ryan being too friendly. I laughed with them because pretending confidence is easier than defending shame. Still, I felt that slow crawl of embarrassment under my skin. I texted Ryan to take the clips down. He replied with, relax. It's just fun. Elias will get over it. I didn't reply. When I got home that evening, the lights were dim and the TV off. Elias was in the study, headphones on, typing something. I asked what he was doing. He said he was catching up on paperwork. The desk looked different, tidier. I saw a small USB drive beside his keyboard labeled with today's date. I asked if it was for work. He said, yes, and for clarity. I told him that sounded cryptic. He said, you like stories. Consider this one of yours. I said I didn't understand. He looked at me finally and said, you don't have to. Not yet. I went upstairs before I could ask more. When I passed his office again, I heard the soft click of a drawer locking. That night I tried to talk, to fix things. I sat on the edge of the bed and said, maybe we both overreacted. He said he hadn't reacted at all yet. I told him he didn't have to make everything sound like a threat. He said, it's not a threat, it's documentation. I didn't know what that meant, but the word stuck in my head, documentation. I said if he thought he could scare me with fancy words, he was wrong. He sighed, pulled the blanket higher and said, I'm not trying to scare you, Amara. I'm trying to be accurate. He fell asleep easily. I didn't. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, replaying the way he'd said accurate, like he was quoting from somewhere official. The next morning, his side of the bed was empty again. Downstairs, the coffee maker was already running. A sticky note was on the counter. Groceries. Don't forget detergent. The handwriting was neat. Too neat. I wondered if that was his way of saying we were fine. At the office, Lena said Ryan had invited people to meet for drinks again. I said I couldn't. She asked why, and I said Elias was being sensitive. She laughed, said men always are when women have fun. That made me feel bold again. I said maybe I'd stop by just to prove a point. When I got home that evening, Elias was back at his laptop. The printer hummed, spitting out a page that slid perfectly into a neat stack beside him. I leaned on the doorframe and said he was turning into a machine. He said, "Machines don't lie." I told him I wasn't lying. He didn't answer. I noticed the framed photo of us on the shelf, our wedding day, was gone. The outline of dust around where it had stood was sharp. I asked where it was. He said he'd put it away because the glass cracked. I checked the trash later. No broken glass, just the empty frame, wiped clean. That night, I dreamed of him sorting papers that turned into photos of me laughing at the bar. Each one stamped with the word recorded. I woke sweating. His side of the bed was empty again. By the third day, the silence felt rehearsed. He wasn't ignoring me. He was building something quiet and deliberate. I started noticing small things. A locked drawer that used to stay open. A new folder icon on his computer named Household. The faint smell of toner in the evenings. I tried one last time to make him talk. I followed him into the kitchen and asked if he was going to punish me forever. He said, "No, I don't believe in punishment." I asked what he believed in then. He said, "Resolution." I told him if he wanted resolution, he could start by forgiving me. He smiled thinly and said, "Forgiveness is the last step, not the first." Then he picked up his mug, rinsed it, and dried it with the same care as always. I went to my car later that night just to sit and think. My phone buzzed with a message from Lena. Manager asked if everything's okay at home. Ryan said Elias looked off when he stopped by his office. I froze. Ryan had gone to Elias's office? I hadn't known that. When I walked back inside, Elias was in the living room, calm as ever. He asked if I'd been out. I said just needed air. He nodded, eyes never leaving mine. Then he said, "Air's good. It clears things, helps separate truth from noise." I asked what that was supposed to mean. He said, "You'll understand when it's time." Upstairs, I scrolled through social media and saw Ryan's new post, an old picture from that night captioned, "Best laughs are the dangerous ones." My stomach flipped. I thought about deleting my tags, but part of me wanted him to see I wasn't ashamed. Downstairs, I heard a faint beep. The printer again. A drawer shutting. Footsteps crossing to the guest room. I whispered to myself that Elias was bluffing, that he'd calm down soon. Still, I couldn't shake the image of that USB drive labeled with the date. The sound of the locked drawer echoed in my head long after the house went quiet. When I finally drifted to sleep, I dreamed of papers falling from the ceiling, each one stamped, not recorded this time, but verified. Monday started like nothing had happened, but I could feel something under the surface, like walking on glass that looks solid until it cracks. At the office, people were already buzzing about the weekend posts. Lena waved me over with a grin. "You're famous now," she said, sliding her phone across the desk. A video played, me laughing, hair falling over my shoulder while Ryan whispered something in my ear. The caption read, "When your best friend's wife knows how to party." The comments were full of fire emojis, and inside jokes I didn't remember starting. I tried to laugh it off. "It's just Ryan being Ryan." Lena said it looked flirty but harmless. Still, the back of my neck burned. Every time someone looked my way, I wondered if they'd seen it. By lunchtime, I knew they had. A coworker from accounting asked if my husband minded all the attention. I told her he was secure, that he didn't get jealous. She smiled politely, like she didn't believe me. When I got home that evening, Elias was already there, sitting on the couch with his laptop balanced on his knees. He didn't greet me. I kicked off my shoes and asked if he wanted takeout. He said he'd eaten. I asked if we were still doing family dinner on Wednesday with his mother. He said quietly, "We'll see." I hated that phrase. It sounded like he was grading my behavior. I told him everyone at work thought the video was funny. He said, "Of course they did." I waited for more, but he just kept typing. Finally, I asked what he was working on. He said, "Sorting things, making sure they're accurate." I said, "You keep saying that word like you're building a case." He closed the laptop and looked at me. Maybe I am. I tried to laugh, but it came out too sharp. "You're not seriously acting like I did something wrong." He said, "I'm not acting, I'm watching." I told him he was being creepy. He said, "It's called documentation. You taught me that the truth can change depending on who tells it. I just want mine to stay clear." Something about the calmness of his tone made me cold. I said, "So now I can't even joke?" He didn't answer. He opened a folder on the coffee table labeled Utilities, pulled out an envelope, checked a page, and slid it back in perfectly. I asked why he suddenly cared about bills. He said, "Because I finally understand what accountability looks like." I rolled my eyes and went upstairs. In the mirror, I rehearsed new ways to make him feel stupid for taking it so seriously. When I came down later, he was on a call, speaking in that low, polite tone he uses with clients. Except when I caught the words consult and timeline, my stomach tightened. I texted Lena. "He's acting weird, like really weird." She replied, "He's probably just embarrassed." "Wait it out." Then she added a wink emoji. I didn't know if that was meant to reassure me or mock me. 2 days later, Ryan sent another message. "We're planning a group night. No cameras this time, promise." I stared at it for a long time. I wanted to say no, but part of me wanted to show Elias that he couldn't control me. I told Lena I'd go. The bar was crowded again, smaller this time, cheaper. Ryan brought shots before I even sat down. He leaned in close, whispering jokes about Elias's lecture voice. I laughed even though I didn't want to. My phone buzzed in my bag, 3 missed calls from Elias. I turned it face down. An hour later, someone yelled my name. When I turned, 2 co-workers were holding up their phones, filming. "Do the toast again," they shouted. Ryan clinked glasses with me, his arm sliding easily around my waist. The flash from one phone made my eyes sting. I told them to stop, but they were already cheering. I pretended to laugh along. When I finally made it home, Elias wasn't in bed. The guest room door was closed, light seeping under it. I knocked once. No answer. I said through the door, "I went out with friends." That's all. The light stayed on. The next morning, I found my mug on one side of the sink and his on the other, like opposing teams. A sticky note sat between them. "Don't forget to check the mail." Outside, in the box, was a brown envelope addressed to both of us from the bank. Inside were copies of new account statements with my name missing from one. I stared at the empty space where it should have been. When I asked him about it later, he said, "I'm updating things. Keeping order." That night, I tried to make him laugh, tried to talk about anything but the bar. He said almost nothing, only asked if Ryan had paid again. I said, "He's generous. Stop twisting it." Elias said, "I'm not twisting, I'm untangling." Friday came, and at work I noticed people whispering more than usual. When I asked what was going on, Lena hesitated. Then she showed me a post someone had screenshotted before Ryan deleted it. Me leaning into him at the bar, his face close to mine, my hand on his chest. The caption read, "Married people can still have fun." I felt the floor drop out under me. I left work early and went straight home. Elias was outside trimming the hedges. I told him about the post, said it wasn't my fault, that Ryan went too far. He didn't even look up. "You told me it was harmless," he said. I said it still was. He said, "Then why are you panicking?" I told him he was twisting everything to make me the villain. He said, "No one has to twist what's already public." Inside, I poured wine and called Lena, whispering that I couldn't take this anymore. She said to give him a few days, that he'd cool off once people stopped talking. I asked if people were really talking. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "You might want to stay off socials for a bit." That night, Elias ate dinner alone in the study. I could hear the faint tap of keys and the whir of the printer again. When I peeked in, there were small stacks of labeled folders: household, accounts, records, dates. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Preparing." I asked for what? "For clarity," he said again. I couldn't take it anymore. I told him he was being paranoid, that he was trying to make me feel small so he could play the moral hero. He said, "I don't need to play anything. You perform enough for both of us." I threw the empty wine glass into the sink. It didn't break, just clinked against the others. I said he didn't love me anymore. He said, "Love and trust are not synonyms." The next morning, he was gone again. The guest room looked untouched except for a small folder left on the desk marked "Follow-up." I didn't open it. I wasn't giving him the satisfaction. I went to shower, humming loudly just to fill the silence. When I came out, my phone buzzed. Lena had sent another message. "You might want to sit before you look at this." Attached was a screenshot. Ryan's girlfriend had commented under the deleted photo before it vanished. "Hope your friend's husband enjoys the show." I felt something tighten around my chest. I sat on the bed, scrolling through my feed. The video had spread to local gossip pages. Some called it "Wife Gone Wild." Others said "Loyalty Test Gone Wrong." My name wasn't tagged, but everyone knew. When Elias came home that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen, shaking. I told him he needed to defend me, that people were getting the wrong idea. He said, "What idea would that be?" I said that Ryan was twisting the story. He said, "You already said he was generous. Maybe generosity looks different from the outside." I begged him to tell people it was fine. He said, "You're the one who likes the audience. Tell them yourself." He walked past me, calm as always, to the guest room. The door clicked shut and the lock turned. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the fridge. The spot where our wedding photo used to hang looked emptier than ever. On the counter, a single USB stick rested beside his keys, labeled with today's date. I touched it but didn't open it. Instead, I poured another glass of wine and whispered to myself that he was bluffing, that he'd forgive me once he realized I still had control. But the faint sound of the printer started again from the guest room, and I knew he wasn't bluffing. He was building something. Quiet, deliberate, unstoppable. Saturday morning felt too bright, the kind of light that exposes everything you'd rather keep hidden. I woke up to the sound of Elias moving around downstairs, drawers opening and closing, papers sliding. I waited for him to come up, to ask about breakfast or say something normal, but he didn't. When I went down, he was packing a folder into his bag, dressed like he was going to work even though it was the weekend. I asked if he was seriously working again. He said, "There's a lot to organize." I asked if it was about me. He said, "It's about order." I told him he was making this sound like an investigation. He said quietly, "If it were, it would already be over." He grabbed his keys, the new silver one glinting among the old brass ones, and left. I stood in the doorway long after the car pulled away, feeling like I'd just been dismissed from my own house. Later, I called Lena, asked if she wanted to meet at the park with Nina. I needed someone to tell me this wasn't falling apart. She said she'd meet me later, but to keep my head down for now because people were still whispering about that video. At the playground, Nina climbed the jungle gym while I sat on the bench pretending everything was fine. One of the other moms glanced at me, then looked away too quickly. I checked my phone to look busy. Ryan had messaged again. "You okay?" Heard Elias is mad. I typed, "I'm fine," then deleted it. Elias showed up an hour later. I didn't even know he was coming. He walked toward us with that calm face that used to mean safety. Nina ran to him, and he lifted her easily, kissed her forehead, asked if she'd had fun. She nodded, smiling, and showed him the drawing she made in the sand. He praised it softly. He didn't even glance at me. I said she should come sit for lunch with us, but he said she'd already eaten. I asked if he'd planned to take her somewhere without telling me. He said, "You said you wanted to get some air." I assumed that meant alone. His voice stayed even, but the edges cut sharp. When Nina went back to the swings, I said quietly that we couldn't keep acting like strangers in public. He said, "Then stop giving strangers something to watch." That stung. I said he was being cruel. He said, "I'm being factual." I told him people were twisting what happened. He said, "You handed them the rope." We sat in silence until Nina called for him to push her. He did, steady and careful, his hand guiding the swing in perfect rhythm. I watched and felt something twist in my chest. For a second I wanted to apologize, but the words wouldn't come out right. I said instead that he was making things worse by being distant. He said, "Sometimes distance is the only thing that keeps people safe." He didn't explain what that meant. When we got home later, I noticed his work bag by the door again. The folder I'd seen earlier was missing. Upstairs, the guest room bed was made, but the nightstand drawer was slightly open. Inside were receipts, printouts, all neat stacks, with dates written in his small handwriting. I flipped one over. It was from the bar, the night everything started. He'd circled the total and written my name beside it. I dropped it back in the drawer and closed it fast, like it might burn. That night I tried to talk again. I told him I was tired of being punished. He said, "You're not being punished. You're being observed." I said that sounded insane. He said, "It sounds organized." I told him that marriage wasn't supposed to feel like a science experiment. He said, "Then maybe you shouldn't have turned it into a performance." I slammed the door and slept in Nina's room, surrounded by her stuffed animals. Their round button eyes felt like tiny judges. On Sunday, Elias's mother came by. She said she just wanted to see Nina, but the way she looked at me said otherwise. She brought groceries, asked polite questions about work, then asked if I'd apologized yet. I said I didn't have anything to apologize for. She sighed and said, "Denial makes the fall harder." I said Elias was overreacting. She said, "He's reacting appropriately, for once." That made me angry. I said she always took his side. She said, "He's the only one acting like an adult right now." Then she kissed Nina's hair, told her she'd see her soon, and left without looking back at me. When I told Elias about it later, he said, "She just wants peace." I said, "Peace is easy when you're not the one being blamed for everything." He didn't respond. That evening, I went to get something from his car. The glove box was locked. It had never been locked before. I stared at it for a long time before closing the door again. Inside, the house smelled faintly of toner. He was printing something again, slow rhythmic hums from the guest room. I said through the door that I wanted to know what he was doing. He said, "Filing." I asked, "Filing what?" He said, "Everything that matters." The next morning, I dropped Nina off at school. Her teacher asked if everything was okay at home. I forced a smile and said we were just busy. She said, "That's what everyone says before something changes." At work, Lena pulled me aside. She said Ryan's girlfriend had been messaging people in our office, sending screenshots, trying to make me look bad. I said she was jealous. Lena said, "Maybe, but she's convincing." My stomach twisted. I texted Ryan, told him to handle it. He said, "Relax. Elias won't believe her." I didn't answer. When I came home, Elias was cooking. It shocked me for a second. He hadn't done that in weeks. The smell of garlic filled the kitchen. I said maybe this was a good sign. He said, "It's just food, not forgiveness." I tried to joke, said he should be glad his best friend found me charming. He set the spatula down slowly and said, "That's your word for it." I said, "Would you rather I called it harmless?" He didn't blink. "No," he said. "I prefer honest." I told him honesty doesn't fix everything. He said, "No, but it records it." After dinner, Nina showed us a drawing she'd made at school. It was of 3 people, me, her, and Elias, standing in front of a house. Except there was a line down the middle, splitting us apart. I asked why she drew it that way. She said softly, "Because Daddy lives in the other room now." I felt my throat close up. Elias thanked her for showing us and told her to wash up for bed. When she left, I turned to him, shaking. "You're ruining her sense of family." He said, "I'm preserving her sense of truth." I shouted that he was turning her against me. He said, "No, you're doing that yourself." That night, I stayed up scrolling through every picture I could find of us. The trips, the anniversaries, the birthdays. I posted an old one of us at the lake with a caption, "Love survives storms." It got dozens of likes in minutes. I smiled bitterly, wondering if he'd see it. Downstairs, I heard his phone buzz once, then silence. The next morning, when I checked my post again, his name wasn't on the likes. He didn't even follow me anymore. That afternoon, he came home early. He said we needed to talk. I braced for another fight, but instead he said, "I've made arrangements." I asked what that meant. He said, "It means I'll handle things properly." The word hung in the air again, sharp and final. He told me he'd be staying at a hotel for a few days to focus. I said he was abandoning his family. He said, "No, I'm giving you time to decide what you actually want to be." I said I wanted things back the way they were. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "That's not a place we can go back to." He left that night. I watched from the window as the car pulled away, taillights glowing like two red eyes disappearing into the dark. In the morning, a new calendar alert blinked on the fridge tablet. Downtown 9:25 a.m. I stared at it, heart pounding, wondering if he'd added it remotely. The fridge hummed softly, reflecting my face back at me, smaller and smaller in the stainless steel. I told myself it was just another meeting. But the silence that followed felt like something far more deliberate. The quiet before a final move I wasn't meant to see coming. The first night without him in the house felt wrong in ways I didn't expect. It wasn't just loneliness. It was the kind of silence that hums. I kept walking from room to room, like I'd misplaced something alive. The air smelled like his cologne faintly mixed with printer ink. He hadn't taken much, just clothes, his laptop, and that folder marked household. I poured a glass of wine, opened my phone, and stared at his contact picture. Part of me wanted to call. The other part wanted him to worry first. I chose pride. I posted another photo from happier days, captioned, "Marriage is teamwork, not punishment." It got likes instantly, even a few comments telling me to stay strong. I wanted him to see it, to feel the guilt. Around 10, a message came from an unknown number. "We'll confirm receipt tomorrow." I thought it was spam until I noticed the area code, downtown. My stomach turned. I tried calling Elias, but it went straight to voicemail. Sunday passed in slow pieces. Lena came over with coffee and sympathy. She said everyone at work was still whispering, but the gossip would die soon. I told her I wasn't worried. She looked around at the quiet house and said softly, "You should be." When she left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the fridge. The digital calendar still flashed downtown 9:25 a.m. I deleted it, but an hour later it appeared again. I told myself it was a sync glitch. That night, Nina asked if Daddy was coming home. I said soon, and she asked if we were in trouble. I told her no, but she didn't look convinced. Kids know when adults are lying. She kissed my cheek and said, "You should tell him sorry. That's what we do at school." I said, "It's different for grown-ups." She said, "It doesn't have to be." Then she fell asleep holding her stuffed rabbit. I sat awake in the hallway, scrolling through messages. Ryan had gone quiet. His profile photo was gone. Account set to private. I checked Elias's page, deactivated. My throat went dry. Monday morning, I went into work trying to act normal. Lena asked if I was okay. I said yes, even though I wasn't. By noon, HR called me in. The manager, Mrs. Graves, sat stiffly across from me and said they'd received an anonymous email with screenshots, videos, comments, timestamps. My name was blurred but still recognizable. She said they had to review it. I said it was personal, not work-related. She said sometimes those things overlap. I left early. Outside, the sun felt too bright. I called Elias again. Still nothing. I left a message saying I wanted to fix things. No reply. That evening, I drove to his mother's house. Clara opened the door halfway. She said, "He's not here." I said I just wanted to talk. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "Talk to someone who believes you," and closed the door. When I got home, a small envelope was taped to the inside of the front door. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. No text, just the printed outline of a form header. Family Records Division. I froze, then told myself it was some clerical mistake. I tore it up and threw it away. Tuesday, I found a note in Nina's backpack from her teacher saying her father had dropped off new contact forms that morning. My hand shook reading it. I hadn't even known he was in town. By evening, I was angry enough to text him. "If you're trying to scare me, it's working. Congrats." He replied 3 minutes later. "Not scare. Clarify." I called immediately. He answered this time. His voice was calm. "Amara, I'm not angry. I just can't keep pretending we're fine. I said we could talk it out, that we didn't need other people involved." He said, "This isn't about talking anymore. It's about process." I asked if he was filing for divorce. He said, "I'm handling it properly." The word again, properly. I told him that sounded like something a lawyer would say. He said, "It is." My knees went weak. I told him he couldn't just walk away from a family. He said, "I'm not walking. I'm documenting the path you already took." Then he ended the call. I didn't sleep. Every sound felt like a step closer to something I didn't understand. The next morning, I saw movement through the blinds. A white sedan parked across the street, engine idling. When I stepped outside, it drove off. That day, Lena called, her voice shaking. She said someone had sent a copy of the HR email to her personal account. It had timestamps from your home router. Amara? I said that wasn't possible. She said, "Then you have a bigger problem than gossip." That night, I tore through the house searching for anything that felt wrong. In the office drawer, I found another USB stick, labeled with yesterday's date. I plugged it into my laptop. Inside was a folder named Verification. Dozens of screenshots, messages, photos, calendar entries, even my posts. My hands shook as I scrolled. The files were neatly organized, dates, locations, captions, every image of me and Ryan, every post I thought I'd deleted. I yanked the USB out and threw it across the room. I called Elias again, yelling into the voicemail, saying he'd crossed a line, that this was stalking. 10 minutes later, he texted, "You called it documentation first, remember?" I sat on the floor until the screen went dark. Thursday morning, I met with a lawyer friend of Lena's, just to see what I was facing. She looked over the situation and said, "If he's building a record, it's not illegal. He's protecting himself." She suggested mediation, but I knew Elias wouldn't agree. He didn't want repair, he wanted order. That night, I tried to reach Ryan. His number was disconnected. His girlfriend had blocked me. Even Lena stopped answering after a while. The house felt heavier than ever. Near midnight, a notification pinged on the home tablet. File uploaded successfully. I froze. The folder was locked. When I clicked, it asked for a password. I typed random guesses until it shut me out. I walked to the guest room door. It was still locked, the faint smell of toner lingering. I pressed my ear against the wood, half expecting to hear his voice. Nothing. I went to bed with my clothes still on. Around 2 a.m, a new email arrived from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Notice of delivery appointment." No text, just a time, Friday 11:30 a.m., and a location, Civic Plaza. I laughed out loud, though it didn't sound real. He was staging something, I thought, another one of his clarity games. I told myself I'd show up, that I'd tell him off in front of whoever he'd dragged into this. In the morning, Nina asked why I was dressed up. I said I had a meeting. She asked if it was with Daddy. I said maybe. She said softly, "Don't yell this time." When I left, she stood by the window waving. The air was heavy with the kind of calm that comes before something permanent. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw his car parked 2 blocks away, facing the street, engine running. He didn't move. The closer I got to downtown, the more I felt like I was driving toward the end of something that had already been decided. My phone buzzed again, Lena's name flashing this time. One short message. "He's serious, Amara. Don't make it worse." I turned the phone face down, gripped the wheel tighter and whispered, "He's not the one in control." But even saying it out loud didn't sound true anymore. Civic Plaza was crowded, sunlight flashing on glass doors and white stone. I spotted Elias near the entrance, calm in a dark suit, a small envelope in his hand. I started to speak, but he turned to the clerk beside him and nodded. She stepped forward and asked my name. When I confirmed it, she handed me a document packet stamped with today's date. Petition for separation, temporary custody, property review. Elias met my eyes once. "It's just procedure," he said. My throat locked. People were staring. I wanted to argue, but the clerk said quietly, "You've been served." The sound echoed louder than anything I could say.